Their house caught fire in November. A small fireplace, covered in snow-white ashes, was originally a tree. He's dead. Now he's alive again through the fire of red mud in the mountains. But alive, he's about to turn to ashes. The first life is blue-green. The second is dark red. The fire friend sighed and threw a red date inside. The date burned. It burns, emits the sweet fragrance of lava juice, a slight explosion of charcoal, sharp, like an iceberg. With the frame hanging on the wall, the little angel with the rose wings stands out in the upper corner, holding a rubby ribbon, and a bowl of light water underneath, holding two colorful ducks, in the middle of which was written, "A year has passed since the 11th day of the new moon, and the purity of Guofeng will be restored." He is from Wuxi County, Zhengzhou Province. He is 36 years old. He was born on March 9th, 1934. Guofeng was standing under the box. One leg knelt on the couch, facing the light melted needle, and Mickey went to get her coat and said, "I'm going out." Guofeng lowered his head and nodded, gently touching his lips. Mi Jinya's coat was half-dressed and staring at him. In the evening, Guofeng looked up and said, and went to look at his face. It was gray, thousands and thousands of little white brothers. Miss Mi said, "I'll be right there." It's hard to say. If you say go over there, this way, that way, it's like saying there's a pub on Little Sand Road. There's another pub here. He used to mention his wife and always say her name, and then Guofeng explained to him. What star says that? So, when he had a hard time bringing it up, he just used a headline, and now he says, "I'm not feeling well, so I'll have to check it out." Guofeng said in a low voice, "Go away." Listening to his accent, Miss Mi was uncomfortable to leave, and he looked out of the window with his hand. "By the way, I don't know if it's going to rain." But Guofeng seemed a little impatient, so she rolled up her clothes and put them in a flour bag. As he was about to go out, Miss Mi opened the door and stopped him, explaining, "Oh no, it's been years, and there's no one to take care of it. It's as if I can't help it. Guofeng is in a hurry. Tell me these things." "What's the matter?" Zhang's mother was washing clothes in the bathroom with the door half open. Zhang's mother was the eldest in her family, and she knew all the details. "Wait a minute, wouldn't it be a joke if he didn't go back to see his wife?" Guofeng Li shouted at the door. "Mommy, you don't have to eat at home every night. You don't have to leave any sheep or goat vegetables. Tofu, you put it on the stove, cover it with ashes, and give it to him." Speaking in a special, dull tone, very old-fashioned, very bad-tempered, but also a bit stubborn, like an authoritative nanny. She's like Shako without Shako. She's tall, her face is thin, thick, straight up Riley's nose, lifted upward, and more conspicuously the loftiness of that tiny nostril. Guofeng came from a very deep background. "You're a big businessman with a history. Married at 16, husband dead at 2013, widowed for over 10 years, and married to Mr. Mi. Now it's quick, but not too quick, because you're always going through the same thing." She touched her hair, stuck cotton balls in front of her hair. The back of his head was made up of a neat little scroll, as orderly and reasonable as the thoughts in his head. He took a leather bag, a purse, white, leather jacket, wrapped in a layer of clothes, his fat white body, colored like a freshwater rabbit, and the flag made a lot of room. It's not too small. For some reason, it always looks like a drum, and it looks like it's wrapped in steel. Miss Mi came along and asked, "Do you want to go out?" Guofeng said, "I went to my mother's house, and you didn't come back to eat anyway, so I had to cook at home." Neither did the dishes I had eaten. a sandwich, a fishbowl, all made for you by the special agent. Mr. Li went back into the living room, standing in front of the desk. A high layer of purple plaque, he put it together. A blue-yellow box, an ice-skinned pencil case, a water fish, a medicine pool. Touching the water, it's always cold, and tomorrow it'll be even colder. When Guofeng comes out again, he'll still be there, touching this and touching that. I can only bend slightly, because I'm wearing a stiff overcoat, and I'm older, and my stomach is in the way. Guofeng asked lightly, "You haven't left yet?" He smiled and didn't answer. He took the leather bag out of the door late, and he followed him out. But he didn't look at me. When he walked quickly to the intersection, he was afraid that he would catch up with him. And although he was angry with her, he didn't want her to show her old age. I crossed the street only when a small car was passing by. I was delayed for a while. I walked a few steps until I realized that it was raining. Little rain, just like the cold silk of the weather, completely unconscious rain. Guofeng was afraid that his leather collar would get wet, but he was going to take off his coat. With too much fatigue in his hands, Mr. Mi picked up his leather bag, one by one, one by one, one by one, and asked, "What's up? Do you want to take off your coat?" "Yes." "Don't move. Let's call it a three-wheeler." When he called for a two-wheeler, Guofeng said, "You're not on the right track with me, are you?" Miss Mi said, "I'll go with you." Guofeng turned around in his fluffy black leather collar. He looked at her with a smile. He grew up with his father's old wife, married, and lived with his wife's family. Unknowingly, they grew up to be siblings on the road to the old-fashioned Longshan temple. The two of them rode in a stroller and frequently took a road to the residential area. On the side of the road there is an empty plot of land, dark sand, mixed with brownish-green lawns, a small brownish attic, cool blue-colored canopy windows. Quietly, in the rain, I don't know why, there's a very striking sense of alienation. Miss Mi couldn't help but think of the time when he first met you. As he was walking, he turned around again, staring at the sandy ground with a black dog, his ears curled up, his black hair slightly curled up. He looked ahead, very attentive, and didn't know what he was hearing or seeing. Mr. Mi remembered the dog's wound on the old transmitter, the symbol, opening the flower box, dancing, the Western woman's body temperature and smell rising in the mouth of the garden grove, and remembering one of her first childhood toys. The tall, green glass puppy is also staring, with two small diamonds in his eyes, thinking of the half-transparent, dark green glass puppy. The dog bites. The teeth get sore. Maybe he's playing with the kid, chewing on it. Maybe he's stopping the kid from putting it in his mouth to chew, in his own mouth. His first child was born in a foreign country. His wife was a female classmate from Guangdong. In the past, it was very rare for foreign Chinese students to meet and soon fall in love and get married. His wife was always nervous, then even more angry, and his own children all fought with him. And fortunately they all went to study in the mainland. There were fewer conflicts, and she was rarely with him during those years. Even when things were going well in the past, the days were rushed through, only remembering the quarrels of a lifetime, nothing worth remembering the happy memories. Yet those years of youth, pain, and misery really hit home. It reminded him now that the grayish rain and the winter had gone into his eyes. Miss Mi decided to put on a pair of sunglasses, and put on a pair of glasses, and put on a pair of sunglasses, and then put on a pair of sunglasses. The outside is cold, the inside is warmer and cleaner, and the rainy weather is like a big brown-black dog with 33 hairs and wet season. The cold black tip of his nose stuck to his face, and he couldn't smell it. Guofeng stopped the car and bought a packet of sugar-coated chestnuts. With the money, he handed the chestnuts to Mr. Me for a while, with a rolled-up paper pocket in his hot hand, and a layer of clothes next to it. She could feel his shoulder, next to the tip of his coat. The tip of his coat. That's the woman he is now. Gentle, superior. 2 years earlier, he was also a handsome man. This time, he didn't take the risk of rushing into the marriage, but he listened in advance and planned it well. In her later years, she could think of a way to make up for her past misfortunes. But she smiled and handed him a bag of beans. He poured out 2 loaves of bread and ate from the dark brown oak trees. His face was red, his face was red, his face was black, his face was black, his face was red, dressing up as well as painting her eyebrows. Miss Me looked at her with a smile. He was beating and scolding the woman he used to be with.
It's true that sometimes you have to say sorry. Sometimes you have to say thank you. And just thank you for being sorry.
She threw away the chestnut shell, clapped her hands, and put on her gloves again. She felt at peace with her husband's shoulder. People were waving their robes against the walls. Don't be afraid of the cold. The tricycle takes you to the post office. The post office takes you to a family home, a gray old-fashioned living room, a balcony. There's a loud song playing in the night, and every time it passes, it reminds him of his grandmother's house, which he wanted to show to Mr. Me. I was in a hurry to stop messing with him today, so I didn't ask him to watch. He looked up, and the old gray-white brother-in-law was climbing up and down the shelves, but this time there was no shouting. There were 2 pots of red roses on the balcony railing, and there was an old lady with her glass door shut. From my mother-in-law's house to Mr. Me's, there are countless twists and turns. Guo Feng is a compassionate, righteous, and holy woman. Clothes also make unscrupulous tailors lose their minds. After many miserable divorces, not to mention her marriage, she took a generation of examples to her online store. Paper pockets are made of newspaper foil. He remembers a newspaper from northern China, where he had packed something the day before, with a movie advertisement on it. The movie is called Generation Madness, and he immediately thinks of himself. After his marriage, he tells this person that he's like this, he tells that person that he's like that. Now that she herself recalls that the 3rd lesson of history was also a little unclear, she smiles and sighs and says, "Oh, speak up." Even after things settled down, he's still blackmailing Miss Me to tell him that her husband has poisoned her. Of course, it's a foolish thing to say, but if you look closely, which of his family's younger brothers hasn't played six or sex? Later, his aunt became famous. He bought a quiet house with his own money. He had a lot of relatives, and now he rarely visits them, except for his uncle's family. The young brothers were all from the old lady's family. Mr. Me hasn't had any contact with them either, because his ex-wife is still there, which is not very nice to call her. They were afraid that they might borrow money from them, and they were afraid that they might be laughed at, and they were afraid that they might be mocked. Several of Julie's relatives bowed to her every moment, especially her cousin, Mrs. Yang, who was so mad that she couldn't stand it any longer. Miss Yang's mother-in-law was Guo Feng's mother-in-law. Among these people, the cousin of the mother-in-law could also speak. Guo Feng was also a dreamer. Otherwise, I wouldn't go to Yang's house very often. Yang's family lived in a middle-class playhouse. Miss Yang was sitting in the dining room playing mahjong. It was very dark. The lights were on at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and a leather table was something that had been around for many years in the hands of Miss Yang's public school to study English. When Miss Yang's husband had just returned from abroad, it was even more difficult. His wife had just given birth to a child. She forced him to eat fruit and sleep by the window, and for this she also offended her mother-in-law. She was encouraged to be a lively housewife. Her living room had a bit of a salon feel to it. Also, like the French lady,
Someone gave her flowers and candy and held her tightly. There are also many bosses who, when they have free time, tell him how unreasonable their wives are. And Mr. Me used to be one of them. He doesn't get a bit of comfort in his own home, so he especially enjoys hanging out with the ladies, and it's nice to be able to smile. Because of this, Miss Yang always thought that Miss Me was the one she had sent for. Under the light, Mrs. Yang, with a long face and 2 long cigarette butts, the long eyelashes wiped away the summer coat, the spring breeze filled the face, the red, white laughter blossomed, the tears flowed, and the moon had 2 tears flowing into the eyes. At home, he was also wearing a fake coat, shrugging his shoulders, holding the coat in his chest to prevent it from slipping, and grabbing Guo Feng's hand, he laughed. "Hey, cousin, hey, Mr. Me, it's been a long time, okay? Say hello to Mr. Me," eyes wide open. Shut the couch, pulled the stove, but still hot, lowered his voice a little, and repeated a sentence. "Okay." Guo Feng's eyes looked from head to toe, as if Guo Feng had created the whole thing by himself. Guo Feng hated him for that. Guo Feng asked, "Is she at home?" Miss Yang sighed. "Hey, did she ever come home so early? Cousin, don't you know that we're home now? It's like a family." Guo Feng knows. "And you're the only ones who've kept your mouth shut all these years." Miss Guo Feng and Miss Mi met for the first time at Miss Yang's house, and the male and female hosts also came with their mouths open, very gay, like a couple of lovers. Miss Mi ate the side dish next door and deliberately talked to Miss Guo Feng and lured Miss Yang to eat the side dish, and then drove Guo Feng home in his car. Guo Feng couldn't even admit that it hurt his self-esteem to say that he had nothing to do with Miss Yang. Guo Feng's jealousy has never been unfounded, he believes. He remembers that night, surrounded by his friends. He was unbeatable, but he was very calm. And now he's expanded, even though he can write slightly sloppy. The poor family must have a kind of cautious generosity. Now that it has expanded, the young family, like most families in these difficult times, it's getting worse by the day. Miss Yang's cards are still to be played, but the people who play have changed, and there are a lot of guys who aren't 3 or 4. Guo Feng simply couldn't see clearly. One of them, wearing a black suit and not even a vest, sat behind Miss Yang and said, "Uncle Yang, I'm going to the store. Do you want me to buy you a soap or not?" Miss Yang hesitated. She slipped off her shoulder and stretched out her thumb. He didn't seem to be afraid of heights, and he didn't feel anything. He turned to sped, but he squeezed a card and slipped on his back. He grabbed it and said, "Well, there's a difference between a man and a woman." Everyone laughed. Miss Yang was always grinding her teeth. However, Guo Feng thought that in the past, since she was a politician, she only felt that she was arrogant, and she said the same thing to her mother. The people listened and seemed to be going downhill. Someone was blowing a whistle in the next room. Guo Feng went to the door and shouted, and Yue Yang was playing the songbook on the table, holding hands, singing in a low voice, and someone was sitting next to him. Guo Feng asked Miss Yang, "Did you learn to play the violin?" Miss Mi also did. It sounded very elegant. Miss Yang laughed. "Soon we'll both be on the stage. Tara, develop the trail. He gets up. I get up." Mr. Mi laughed. "And Mrs. Yang's character is just as good." Miss Yang said, "Let's light the fire inside." The kids in the study were very enthusiastic, including Miss Wang Shuting and Guo Baoshan's 2 younger brothers. "If people are too busy, I won't let you join them either." Someone at the card table asked, "Uncle Yang, what's the name of the young lady? What's her name? Why is she only called you?" Miss Yang laughed. "It's the Mid-Autumn Festival." Guo Feng remembers the birthdays of his relatives best, because in all these years, the more he has no money, the more he is afraid of losing his human rights. They were talking about it, and they said, Your birthday is at the end of April. Miss Yang smiled and put her coat on the table. He came first, shrugged his neck, and then followed Guofeng, staring at him, and whispering, "It's April in the summer, but it's the end of April." The first sight of him was on the evening of August 15th. Everyone heard him, laughed, and said, "Uncle, Aunt Wang." Guofeng is embarrassed. For the sake of the decency of her family, she doesn't want Miss Mi to go downstairs and listen. "I'm in a hurry. I'm going upstairs to see the old lady." She nodded her head and walked away. Miss Yang nodded her head as well. "You go up first. I'll be right there." On the stairs, Guofeng walked in front of her. Looking back at Mr. Mi, he smiled and said, "Thank you for making him look like a living treasure." Miss Mi was always carrying gold. Miss Yang's children appeared at the stairwell, calling her aunt, and she was confused. The old woman loved cleanliness. "I didn't dare to enter the room, so I didn't follow." The room had a gray-green metal desk, metal armchairs, and precious metal papers. Refrigerator phone. Because of the open history of the Yang family in the past, even the old lady liked foreign things that were colorful and attractive. But in the meantime, in the open air, it still felt like an old lady's room. The old lady had quit smoking opium, but still had a cigarette case. Looking at the newspaper on the flower menu, the cotton fork revealed a flesh-purple silk stocking, wrapped in a bag on the ankle, which became a footstool. She sat up and accompanied me. He spoke to them, wiped the corner of his face with his own hand, and apologized with a smile. "Look what I've become. If you want to make a silk dress, a skirt and a dress for the price of one, just put them together and say, 'Mr. Li, we can't have a pot of charcoal until it's really cold.'" Guofeng said, "He advised me to make a leather robe. I have 2 old men's skirts here, and I want to take them out and change them." The old lady replied, "They are no better than the old ones. The cloak is only more sturdy than it is now." Guofeng said, "I'm afraid it's not enough." The old lady said, "The man's robe is big. Isn't it enough that you've changed it?" Guofeng said, "The 2 pieces I took sounded particularly small." Miss Yang laughed. "Are they yours? I remember you used to dress up in men's clothes, wear a tongue-tied hat, and take off a big beard like a singer." Guofeng, "No, it's not my own clothes." He's still smiling, with a pink face, and he's got a lot of past. Her husband was a skinny young man, and the old lady knew that he was talking about his clothes, and Mr. Mi naturally knew that, and he was very upset. Standing up and being handcuffed, watching the pairings on the walls. A little girl at the door scans her head. She walks by, bends down to play with it. The old woman asks the child, "Why don't you know how to call someone? Don't you know who it is?" The girl was just twisting and turning. Miss Young thought to himself, "There is no other name besides Mr. Tommy." The old lady only asked questions, and even Guofeng followed. "Little man, I'll give you some chestnuts." Miss Mi was annoyed and interrupted him. "What about the chestnuts?" Guofeng pulled out some chestnuts from the bag. The old lady said, "Enough is enough." Mr. Mi said, "Doesn't the old lady eat?" Guofeng hurriedly said, "Mother-in-law is a snack. I don't eat, I remember." Miss Mi also said, but Ms. Yang was embarrassed and said, "Don't be rude, I really don't eat." Yes. There was a bag of cigarettes on a teacup next to the cigarette butts, and the old lady accidentally put a piece of paper on it and tortured it. Guofeng replied, "Today's pez are for sale." The old lady replied, "They're expensive and bad, and they're called the Tang dynasty. There's no sugar when it's roughly cooked. So this year's example is particularly sweet." Guofeng didn't hear the gaps in the words either. Miss Mi asked, "Have you taken any sugar from the house?" The old lady replied, "No, There is no sugar in the newspaper today. Ordered a newspaper, that is, to look at household rice, household sugar. These things in our house. I don't care. I don't care. I didn't think I'd live to see this day. I'm going to count the years. Guo Feng laughed. I really wanted to tell my aunt that the day before we went out together, we lost our lives on the road. Miss Yang laughed. Guo Feng laughed. We were just kidding. We only paid her $50. Mrs. Yang laughed. That's cheap. What did he say? Guo Feng laughed. Say it. He forgot Miss Wang me. The next thing I know, I'm telling him that everything is fine with me, that he has 12 years to live. And he's amazed, as if it was an accident.
The 12 years sounded a little different in Miss Mi's ears, making him feel a little cold. Miss Yang was also an older woman.
It's the same feeling. It's strange that Guo Feng doesn't talk much anymore. He's in a hurry. The iron gate you used to look for is now closed. I heard it was very red. Guo Feng shook his hand. Now I can't find him. I can't even get a special sticker. Yeah, it's hard to hear you talk about fate anymore. There's a saying, poor fate burns incense. He laughed. Guo Feng didn't like to hear this and didn't care to pay any attention to Mr. Mi. Mr. Mi went back to his seat and walked across the stove.
When I was on stage, I looked at the clock, the old-fashioned clock, the long red leather jacket, the dark crystal face, the very thin long short needle, and I looked at the clock.
Guo Feng knew that he was remembering his sick wife again. Miss Yang asked Miss Mi, is there a fate for foreigners too? Hell, mister, there's also 8-letter words based on time, and there's with glass balls, with cards. Guo Feng shook his hand again. I've also looked for a foreign destiny, that of Brin, a famous woman, or the one who died at that time. This made it clear to her that I couldn't get along with my husband. I said, how about that? She said, you bring him here. I'd better advise him. It's not a joke. How many people in the family have advised him not to use it? Just tell him. I said, no, I can't. He's different from me. How can he listen to me? He said, then you bring one of his friends. But the more you talk, the further away you are from him. What's the use of bringing a friend? Obviously it's business. Then I didn't go any more. The old lady listened to him mention her ex-husband and it wasn't over. Miss Mi was obviously embarrassed, sitting there with his feet crossed and his hands on his stomach, his mouth closed and smiling reluctantly. And the old lady said, oh, you said you were going to change cooks. The old king here said he was going to see you. Now the old king himself has come to see you. I've gone too. I've run away from the gang. You, sir, it's very difficult to use people now. Guo Feng said, then somewhere, no one can help you. That's enough. The old lady looked out the door and whispered, don't you know that I'd like to use fewer people? Otherwise, the forbidden stood beside the card table, and then your cousin took the stuff. Now I'm going to take care of all the rough stuff, and I'd rather take care of it. Give him some more money. Today, I don't know how. Let your cousin know that we owe him money. He'll look like a landlord right away. Support him to go out and buy cigarettes. The smoke is gone. Do you see that? Guo Feng laughed and asked, is my cousin still inviting guests to play cards and eating snacks? Miss Zhang said, where are the supplies? They haven't all gone home by the time dinner is ready, so now they're all in the same class. I'll send it to them. The old lady found some antiques for Miss Mi to sell and asked him to estimate them. The old lady was holding the top end of the scroll. Miss Mi was holding the bottom corner, and the two of them stood and watched. Guo Feng was sitting on a small stool in front of the chimney, hugging the knees, the fat arms, the fat knees. I felt like a little child again. very small under the adults. The world is changing. My mother-in-law sells things to make a living. And my cousin will still be there playing cards, but it was also miserable. Only Guofeng, after the adventure of marriage, returned to the hands of a reliable person. It was as if he had never left. Miss Mi looked at it and said, "What is this chapter about? But now there's a lot of nitric acid on the outside." The old lady looked at him and thought, people with such a high status in the church, and so educated, new and old, and knowledgeable and considerate, really got Guofeng married. Guofeng's child is no longer young, and has no heart and no eyes. And in the meantime, he's lost his mind. That's fine too. It's different now. Men will accept this. If it was in the past, that would be fine. But Guofeng, it's not that I've never suffered like a man before. It's just that I'm so lucky. Miss Mi is 60 years old this year, the same age as me. I've suffered so much. I've been dragging this whole family along. My mother-in-law hasn't listened to my mother-in-law's advice, and she hasn't brought my son home. And it's all on me. How is it possible to live as quietly and peacefully as Guofeng in a small cottage? I'm so old, there's nothing else I can do but try to make him feel comfortable. He rolled up his sketchbook and said, I've hired a book artist. When you come tomorrow, let Miss Mi take a look first, and I'll be reassured. Even though it's a very casual 2 sentences. There is a kind of tenderness in the sound, but it is very touching. Mr. Mi has not received much mercy from women in his life. With a little kindness, he realized. He laughed. When are you going to invite the old lady over for dinner? I have a few things to play with. It's worth a look. The old lady laughed. When it's cold, I'm afraid to go outside. Guo said, Take the tricycle. Anyway, hurry up. I'll pick up my mother-in-law when we're done with the cook. The old lady said yes, and she thought to herself, it's also worth the money for the tricycle. If I come alone, I'll need someone to accompany me. One more meal is almost enough. Guofeng said, The thing about tricycles is that there are 2 women sitting side by side, and 2 big men sitting side by side. I don't know. It's always silly. A man and a woman sitting together is always a little hard to get along with. The old lady laughed and said, If 2 unrelated people were sitting together, and indeed some of them were not committing a crime, what would be the difficulty in making friends like you and Mr. Mi? I'm always a little uncomfortable. She thought of herself sitting next to Miss Mi like a flower. Miss Mi, besides wearing glasses, whole like a baby, with a small nose and small eyes, as if no one could decide whether she should cry or not. The suit she was wearing, the waistline was straight, just like the waistline of a packed shark. Guofeng took a quick look at Miss Li and turned his head. His face was glossy, neat, like a 3-digit high-floor canopy with floor on it, and he was wearing a heavy shirt collar. Her first husband was 1,000 times worse, but at least she wasn't ashamed to admit that he was her husband. She was only 25 when he died. His face was pale, his eyebrows were pale, and his eyes were smiling, I don't know how badly. Miss Mi went to get the newspaper. The old lady handed it to me and said, Did you guys come in to see a play? There's a play on the 6th of July that my granddaughter and I watched, and they said goodbye. It's funny to say that there's an old-fashioned way to get married. Guofeng shook his head. I've seen it. It's not like that at all. We started from scratch. Where is there such a thing? The old lady said, There are different customs everywhere. Guofeng said, There can't be too many differences. The old lady glanced at Mr. Mi. Mr. Mi seemed to be bored. He took the paper, rolled it up and folded it again. When he came back,
He looked at the clock on the front page of the newspaper. Guo Feng said coldly, "It's not too early. You should go first." Miss Ami smiled. "I'm not busy. I'll wait for you to leave." Guo Feng didn't say anything. However, he still looked at me with disappointment.
He stared at her again, and the old woman cried out in her heart, "Look at them. They're so good-natured and self-controlled. If you're curious,
they should leave the room and come back when they've finished speaking. But they're too lazy to do so, and they deserve to live."
We've been together all our lives, and what's not nice to say to people from the north comes to everyone's eyes. When Miss Ami talks about theater, he talks about foreigners, my opera, the drama, the dancing on the island of Bali. The old lady said, "Miss Ami has been to a lot of places." Miss Ami also talked about cards, the famous temple of the Kingdom of Cambodian, with a 2-foot-thick silver brick in the ground, a Buddha with a golden crown around his neck, and a red and blue diamond in the waistband. However, Guo Feng just looked at him coldly and hated him because he missed his wife, because he rode a tricycle with her. "It's not pretty enough." Miss Ami said, "It used to be impossible to travel now."
The old lady said, "As long as the war is over, it won't be easy for you to get up." Miss Mi laughed. "Guo Feng has already decided. I'm going to take her with me." Miss Yang said, "She's very happy." Guo Feng sighed coldly.
Alas, how can it be said that both of them are still alive? He also asked in a vague voice. I felt that this sentence was a good one for exporting merchants, and I was a little frightened myself, so I added one more sentence. "I don't know if you're dead or alive." He tried to hide himself again, but he laughed in vain.
He seemed to take his hat and smiled as he said he was going to leave. The old lady kept him for a while longer. Guo Feng said he had to go somewhere else for a while. Let him go first. Take a step. After Mr. Mi left, the old lady asked Guo Feng, "Where is he now?" Guo Feng came up to the chimney. "Please sit next to the old lady and whisper. The old lady is sick. Go and see her." The old lady said, "Oh, what's wrong, Guo Feng?" "The doctor hasn't decided if it's pneumonia. He's been going there every day for the past 2 days. Speaking of which, he can't be alone."
At 7 o'clock, 2 songs on his knees, one hand clenching his fist freshly, one hand flattening the front and rear thrust, pushing, filling the walls.
The old lady laughed. "Then you wouldn't have gone with him anyway, knowing that he was serious about you." Guo Feng was busy.
Of course, I went with him. First of all, I'm not a glutton, and I don't have any feelings for him at all. The old lady laughed. "It's just a temporary plan." Guo Feng looked up, but only one of his eyes was hard on the face of his mother, empty-hearted, almost turning a blind eye. Yet she was still smiling. "Unfortunately, my aunt didn't know that I was completely forgotten."
The old lady laughed. "What kind of a couple are we now?" Guo Feng was in a hurry. "What's the point of talking to your mother? To be honest, I wouldn't marry Miss Mi if I wanted a man." She blushed and smiled a little closer. "But it's really hard for us. Maybe once in a few months." When he had finished, he stared at each other with a smile on his face. The old lady couldn't think of an appropriate response, just smiled. Guo Feng explained the old lady's intentions and said, "Of course, the couple's feelings. I don't care about your feelings, but it's really hard for Miss Mi to fall in love with him." The old lady said, "He's been very kind to you." "I don't think you're being nice to her either." Guo Feng said, "Yes, I have to take care of her for my own sake too. Dressing, undressing, eating and drinking. Congratulations. Always want to take good care of her. It's better to live 2 more years." She joked and laughed herself. The old lady said, "It's good that Miss Mi is healthy,
and looks like a 60-year-old man. Guo Feng said, "First I'll tell my aunt what happened on the road.
I only said half when I saw him. That he was a businessman, that he had more than one wife in his life, and that he was going to lose his wife this year."
7. The old ladies. "Oh, then the disease can't be cured." Guo Feng.
Then I asked, "But I'm going to die." "Fortunately, it's not you. You're the only one left." The old lady said,
"Even if that woman is really dead." Guo Feng stooped down and rubbed his knees and laughed softly.
"Who says it isn't?"
The old woman came in and said, "The tiger has brought the bathwater." The old woman said, "The water that was called in the morning."
Guo Feng was in a hurry. "Is my aunt still taking me as a guest?" My aunt, despite taking a shower, sitting alone for a while.
The tiger picked up a bucket of water with a lot of effort. The grandmother rushed through the room, and the old lady followed her into the bathroom. He ordered her to pour the water into the bathtub, and greeted her carefully. "Don't get your hands dirty on the towel." Guo Feng sat alone in the room. It was quiet. The phone rings in the neighbor's house were ringing in the distance, and in the silence, it was like singing, singing, singing in the ears, again and again. I don't know why. There's always no one to pick me up. Just like there's 1,000 words that can't be said. Anxious, begging, desperate. Guo Feng trembled for him for no reason, remembering Miss Mi's uncertain state of mind for the past 2 days. He doesn't understand, and he shouldn't understand either. He stood up, his hands clasped, and stared timidly at the next person. The phone is still ringing. It's getting colder. And even the house over there looks like an empty house. He came out with a bucket of water, and Guo Feng turned around and said, "The phone is ringing loud and clear over here." The old lady said, "This house was originally built for horses and mules." The old lady put a stack of ready-made bills on the stove before paying for the water. He was 10 miles away, and the next day he gave it to her as a tip. The snot-nosed pig on the fox's tail laughed and walked away, and the old lady said, "Nowadays, $10 worth of wine. Who's to say thank you?" He's getting younger, and Guo Feng is laughing too. The old lady went into the bathroom and shut the door. Soon Miss Yang came upstairs. She walked into the room and asked, "Is the old lady bathing there?" Guo Feng nodded and said yes. Miss Yang said, "I have a red and pink shirt hanging behind the door, and I want to take it out." The heat was so intense that it ruined the color. He tried to push the door, but Guo Feng said, "I'm afraid I've climbed the mountain," sat down on the mantelpiece, rolled up her velvet coat, and wrapped it tightly. There was no man beside her, and she put her lively. Guo Feng asked, "Why did you leave so early after making a few rounds?" Miss Yang said, "There are 2 people here." Guo Feng looked at him and laughed. "Only you, if you can see clearly, will be entertained." Miss Yang said, "No one can see you. What about me? Even if I play this card, how many wins and losses can I have? Like your cousin, now he's halfway back, no matter where he is, sitting still. I'll have to ask for money too. It's all my fault that he can't stay at home. It's all my fault, no matter how small." "Lady," he looked ahead and said in a low voice, "now it's up to the old lady to save $2 overnight, all right? Don't tell me I know how to play cards. There are a lot of people in this church who make a lot of money in small business. What do you buy? Bring us a little grain. It's worth more." Guo Feng laughed. "Then you must be very good-natured in this matter." Miss Yang stood up and applauded. Finally, he laughed coldly. "I'll have to pay for the shares too. I'm not in charge of the money. If I'm in charge, I'll be in charge. I don't care." He jumped up suddenly,
pointing to the metal desk chair, the high-end papers, the hatred.
Look at this! Look at this! Everything's in his room. Even the phone, the fridge. I'm not counting on that.
Guo Feng knew that the walls here were not thick, and he was afraid to be heard in the bathroom, so he didn't dare to follow him.
What kind of person is it that blows the flute at the foot of the moon? Miss Yang replied. It's also a part of their study. He's a good reader, and his classmates have been writing to me, and I've been playing with them, and a few of the little ones couldn't keep up with their homework. They're there to help with the bookkeeping, and they'll save you a lot of money. There's a lot of things you can do to help with the running. The housekeeper couldn't be bothered. Sometimes, though, he'd get into unexpected trouble. He'd sit on the edge of the bed, with the rain covering his body, his elbows on his knees, squeezed into the collar of his coat, sniffed his nose heavily, and laughed out loud. I'm kidding. The peach blossom thing isn't over.
He waited for Guo Feng to ask questions, waited for a moment, and glanced at Guo Feng. Guo Feng had a time when he was very fond of these things about Miss Yang. Now his own situation is different from before. He is married in peace, and he can't help but exchange a harsh look for a relationship outside of marriage. Miss Yang has a lot of lovers. One can't get married and the other can't support herself. So Guo Feng frowned and said that only you. It's worth discussing for the rest of her life. Ask her if she has any friends. Miss Yang said, I'm not asking about her. Whatever his grandmother and father say, he'll be against it. Guo Feng said, I don't like the man I just saw. Miss Yang said, you say that the one who blows the flute has nothing to do with the man. However, Guo Feng is a woman with a marriage plot. For her, every man is possible. Until he confirmed that he had no chance, he insisted. I don't think he's very good. What do you think? He clapped his hands on his chin, his feet on the floor, and said, That's an unrelated person. Guo Feng said, Of course, I see that he's not used to it. She laughed and said, I know what kind of man you like. But it's the other way around. The first is to be reliable, and the second is to be gentle and considerate, just like Miss Me. Guo Feng suddenly stopped talking, and his face turned red. Miss Yang stretched out a cold, snow-white hand, grabbed Guo Feng's hand, and laughed. You look so beautiful, just like you do now. In that case, what's the point? Guo Feng acknowledged his happiness in front of Miss Yang, that is, acknowledged Mrs. Yang's grace, so I had to complain even more. How do you know about my old affairs? Miss Yang laughed. What's the matter? Guo Feng lowered her head. One hand squeezed the fist gently on the knee, one flattened on the knee, pushed slowly, focused, pushed. The old woman is ill, and it's fate that she's going to lose her wife this year. Didn't you see the look on her face? Miss Yang buried half her face in her coat, but revealed a pair of sharp eyes, stared coldly at Guo Feng, and thought to herself, Being Miss Yi is like being a doctor. She looks like an old woman, and it's almost like Miss Me's old head. Miss Yang laughed. Is it bad that he's dead? Guo Feng didn't want to listen to her, so he said, Whoever wants to kill her, she doesn't love me at all. Miss Yang said, Yes, if I were you, I wouldn't argue with them about the reputation. It's true that money is in the hands of the rich. Guo Feng saw that the people were still angry when I took it. How much money? Of course I know that Mr. Li won't do me any harm in his will in the future, but he doesn't mention it, and I'm not good at mentioning it. Miss Yang opened her eyes and said, You can ask him. Guo Feng said, How do you think he'll be so indifferent? Miss Yang hesitated for a moment and said, You fool, the money has passed from your hands and you haven't come down yet. Guo Feng said, You should come down too. Who's that? It's not the same as it used to be. Men talk about the price of rice all day long, the price of maize, and everybody has a number. Miss Li is now in the company, and if he doesn't put his name on it, it's like he's quitting.
Family expenses, having only a few small children in the country, that's all that matters. It's better to save some money. But it's the old people who need it, and everything is still the same. If you go to the countryside for a while, you'll have more flowers, he said. Ma'am, I asked you for some money to buy 2 handkerchiefs and send them back. When I came back, he brought us chickens. I can't take it for free. I can't afford it. And I'm standing in front of people with a frown on my face. Miss Me was, too. He said you should go and ask his wife, and she was kind enough to do it for me. Miss Yang went and forgot about it, smiling as he listened to her repeat the old lady's words. He thought she was the one who had escaped. The old lady opened the door and came out in exchange for the old woman to go in and wipe the sink, and at the same time ask, "Why do you smell so hot? Isn't it on that coat?" The shelf replied, and she went to the dressing room to check it out. There was a shelf of clothes on the stairs, and the old lady said, "Who's calling?" "I'm the only one with a headache and a headache and a headache. Do I like to drip and drip and drip and drip? Things are different now." "Hi, Mr. Me is here." Guo Fang was in the room, and from the open door, he saw Mr. Me go up the stairs, and he was overjoyed, and he pretended to be weird. "Why are you here again?" Mr. Me smiled. "I was just passing by, too, thinking of picking you up." He pulled out the shroud from the bathroom, stuck his hand into the red sleeve of the shroud, and smoked it one by one, laughing. Hey. Oh, how good and thoughtful Mr. Me is. He's coming to pick you up in the rain. Mr. Me touched his coat and laughed. "It's not raining now." Miss Yang came. "Sit down for a while. It's hard to come." Mr. Me took off his coat and sat down. He laughed slowly. "Okay, Mr. Me?" Miss Me laughed very cautiously. "Ah, I'm fine. Hello?" Miss Yang sighed and said a nice word. Only the outer breath can enter. Guo Fang was listening next to her, and she was worried that she might be disappointed. Sitting down and writing Miss Me's overly cautious kiss was like thinking too much of yourself. And he thought, "I always tell you, he can't play anymore, and he doesn't look like your old man. Is he really interested in you?" However, he's always had a grudge against Miss Yang. Half of it was because there was no new object of jealousy, and half of it was because the old woman was less hated. Now she and Miss Yang, Miss Hemi and the 3 of them were sitting in a gradually darkened room, and he was tossing and turning and recalling his slightly unformed triangular love affair. He is victorious. Although victory does not mean anything, victory is ultimately victorious. He pretends to be unconcerned, picks up a cup of tea, and in the cold, clear skies he went upstairs and held out a cold cup of tea. He saw the tobacco leaves on the cup, turned the cup around, and there was a red star-shaped marker. He opened the door. Her high-priced lipstick was guaranteed not to stain. It must have been the teacups of the Young family that were unclean, and I don't know who drank them. He turned around again and went to a clean place, but he didn't mean to drink tea all the time. Miss Yang saw Miss Me coming, and prevented Mrs. Yang from coming. The old woman, who was about to make out with him, rushed into the room in a hurry. Miss Yang felt it too, smiled relentlessly, and sniffed her nose. They stood up and laughed as they pleased, but the firemen told them to change their clothes and went outside. The coat was worn as a cloak, and the bottom of the cloak looked cold. The 2 little legs, 1 foot in front of the other, swayed and swayed. The old lady, fearing that she would buy a lot of snacks with her head, followed them out. He shouted, "Buy some bananas. They've been on the market for 2 days." Guo Fang hurriedly said, "Oh, uncle, don't bother. We're not hungry." Neither did the old lady. The mother-in-law and daughter-in-law stood at the door of the staircase, sent their servants out to buy food, but secretly complained. Guo Fang has always been very popular in these places. The poets have always been uninterested in each other. Sometimes they bring a little something new, But now she's not. I don't care about that anymore, and I don't care if we do either." Miss Yang laughed. "The guests are the head of the party, and I can't help it if I'm not careful."
Mr. Guofeng and Mr. Mi were alone in the room. I don't know why, but they were both a little tired. Guofeng's face was full, but he felt that his eyes were twisted.
He laughed in his face. Mr. Mi laughed. "What's the matter? When are you going back?" Guofeng said. "You haven't eaten yet," she called out to her mother, and didn't eat at home. She couldn't help but smile and said, "Why are you in such a hurry to come and go?" Mr. Mi hasn't had a chance to reply yet. The old lady's mother-in-law has returned to the room. Everyone is chatting and eating shellfish, and there are 2 left. The old lady ordered the servants to call the youngest girl and give her a hot meal. The little girl came in and said, "Grandma, look, there's a red one in the sky." The old lady slammed the glass door open, and the crowd stood on the balcony to watch, with Guofeng's hands in his sleeves, stuttering for a moment. "It's sunny, it's even colder, and now it's just a few degrees." She walked up to the front of the stove, and the countdown clock on the stove became familiar to her when she was a maid. It's a small green glass tower. The sunlight shines on it, reflecting a greenish-yellow light on the couch covers. The sun was rising. Guofeng held out his calculator and suddenly heard the phone ringing in the house next door. He listened attentively. Even though someone came to pick him up, his heart was wide open. The old mother's throat, with a rough atmosphere, shook impatiently, cutting off the hard-to-get-out plea over there, and then barking for a while, barking, 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 barking. Guofeng stood there, stunned, looking back at the balcony, seeing Mr. Mi's back, with his half-naked back barely connected to the fat landscape. Next to Mr. Gemi, a red patch appeared in the pale blue sky, short and straight, red and purple, the sun shining. The sun on the balcony, the gray on the concrete railing, the heavy gold, and then the china, and then the delay. Mr. Mi's face turned red, thinking that his wife was about to die. Most of his life followed, and he didn't count the sadness in his life together. No, it doesn't matter. Mr. Mi looked at Hong. His love for this world was not love, but longing. She dressed herself in a coat and handed him Miss Mi's handkerchief, saying, "Put it on, it's cold." One said, and the other apologized. He looked at his parents with a wry smile, as if to say, "I'm not doing it for the money, I'm doing it for him, and I'm doing it for myself." Then everyone understood. Mr. Li wrapped himself in a scarf and laughed. "We can go too. Eat and drink." They said goodbye, walked into the chapel, went downstairs to the basement, lay on the floor, and I don't know who put a little hot stove in there, smoking white smoke, like a living thing. In that empty hall, Mon looked almost as if he were a dog or a child. Outside the hall, pedestrians rarely walked like a clear morning. This area is covered with pale yellow dust walls, and because of the moisture, it is dark, and there are sheep and goats in the streets. The yellow leaves of a tree, like spring flowers, are full of romance. A little yellow tree with a wall of ashes, extra foliage. The leaves are burning in the trees. The eyes are staring at it. You're flying a big circle, grabbing people's foreheads. How far is the land still drifting? There is no love in the world that isn't frightening. Yet Mr. Guofeng and Mr. Mi are still in love on the way home. As he walked along the flowery path, Guofeng thought, "Don't forget to tell him about Nanjing."